Good evening and welcome to our ReggieCon panel discussing Suncatcher in celebration of Latinx Heritage Month. This is our first ReggieCon panel for the fall semester with many more to come, so no need to worry. But please feel free to be on the lookout for our future panels. My name is Jana Albrecht. I'm the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Illinois State University. Before we begin the panel, I just have a few details to keep everything running smoothly for all of us and all of you in the audience. First, we do record the session. So it will be posted to the ReggieCon website. And then second, if you need confirmation of attendance for tonight's event, we will post the link. It'll just be more towards the end of the panel, so you can complete that at that point. Third, the presenter's video and audio are on, but we can't hear or see any of you as guests. So that said, we will monitor the Q&A function, and we do encourage you to ask questions. The presenters, the panelists love that part of it. Just know that if you ask a question early, they may not get to it until a little bit later. And so the last update that is more of just a reminder that you can check the ReggieCon website early and often, feel free. We have previous panels on there that you can take a look at, and then you can also stay in the know for some of our future panels and events. So enough of the housekeeping. At this time, I am pleased to introduce our fearless leader, Dr. Scott Jordan. Dr. Jordan is the chair of psychology here at Illinois State, and he also happens to be our moderator and a panelist for tonight's discussion. Scott, please take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Jana. It's just fantastic to see you again in this ReggieCon context. And welcome everyone to ReggieCon, the con that asks the question, what's your story? As Jana said, I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty. I'm a cognitive psychologist philosopher here at Illinois State University. I'm also the producer of Dark Loops Productions on YouTube. When we talk about tonight's panel, we will make a recording of it, as Jana said. And then we will be posting that on YouTube at Dark Loops Productions. So you can just type Dark Loops Productions into the Google machine. And once I have it loaded, you can type in Suncatcher in the Google machine, and you'll be able to find the video of tonight's conversation. So tonight we come together to celebrate Latinx Heritage Month with a discussion of the amazing graphic novel you can see to my right, Suncatcher. Joining me in tonight's panel is that motley crew of comic and pop culture aficionados, purveyors of all things geekdom, the ReggieCon crew. First, the hardest working man in comics, Mr. Victor Dandridge Jr. Victor, please come on in, tell the audience a little something about who you are and what you do.
Why, hello. I am Victor Dandridge, lovingly called the hardest working man in comics. I'm a self-publishing comic creator from Columbus, Ohio, self-publishing through my imprint Vantage and House Productions. I'm also a phenomenological narratologist through my You Create Comics line that takes me into schools to help kids use comics to bridge classroom fundamentals and dynamics. I am a co-host of Black, White, and Red All Over, the comic review show on YouTube, as well as The Mind Behind Unconventional, where I'm sharing some unconventional thoughts about being in the comic industry as professional and creative.
Well, it's fantastic. And I do watch your podcast on comics every once in a while. And you guys are on like episode 456.
Yeah, we've been doing this for like 10 years. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. That's fantastic.
Jumps up on you. Thank
Excellent. You. No, you're more than welcome. And it's really good to see you again in this ReggieCon context, Vanessa.
Absolutely.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce the producer of the About That podcast, the one, the only Dr. Vanessa Hintz. Vanessa, please come on in, tell everybody who you are and a little something about what you do.
Thank you so much. And I will go after Victor after all of that he just said, and say that I am Dr. Vanessa Hintz. I use she, her pronouns. I am a licensed clinical psychologist just west of Milwaukee in Waukesha, Wisconsin. I am a podcast host. The About That podcast takes a deep dive into the psyche of pop culture, so feel free to give us a listen. I'm also an equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant, and so I'm here to just make the world safer and more inclusive for all folks. So thank you, and it's wonderful to see you all again, too. I'm very excited.
No, that's awesome. And I'm totally digging it. That sweatshirt you're wearing there. Love that ReggieCon logo. It's fantastic. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce tonight's guest panelist. He joined us for last year's celebration of Latinx Heritage Month when we discussed Dark Room, the one, the only, Mr. Edcel Cintron Gonzales. Edcel, come on in. Tell everybody who you are and a little something about what you do.
Sure. Hello everyone. I'm Edcel Cintron Gonzales. I'm currently a PhD student in the English department. Currently I'm focusing on mental health picture books as my dissertation topic, and I also work a lot with Latinx literature, both in young adult and children's literature. I'm actually teaching that right now in my 170 course, so it's pretty exciting stuff. Besides that, I am a picture book reviewer. I do one picture book a month for the Palabradores newsletter, which is a writing group newsletter from back home, Puerto Rico, where I'm originally from. And lastly, I am a poet. My chapbook of poetry launched last May called Irma Maria, Fiona, and Me, which talks about my experience of childhood and adulthood with the different hurricanes I have passed through Puerto Rico. So that's just a little bit about me and the kind of work I do.
Love it.
Well, we're thrilled you're here. And
Absolutely.
If we run out of audience questions after 8 o'clock, we may ask you to pull out a bit of poetry for us.
That's right. That's right. Actually, Edcel, I got to say, I just went to Puerto Rico for the first time like 2 weeks ago, and it's a hard pull for me to be back in crummy Ohio versus Puerto Rico. Like it's gorgeous down there.
There are nice places in the world. Exactly. And now, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, I just want to say I'm glad Victor got to go to Puerto Rico. I miss it every time, especially the food. That's like the number one thing I miss about home.
Yeah. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce tonight's special guest, the author and illustrator of Suncatcher, Mr. Jose Pimienta. Jose, please introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a little something about who you are.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. So, yes, my name is Jose Pimienta. I go by Joe, as fine, pronouns they, them. And yeah, I make comics. I live in California. I've written and drawn some graphic novels, and I've drawn graphic novels that other people have written as well. So for a while, my day job was working on commercial storyboards, but nowadays comics seem to be taking the full plate. And I'm going to say this comment, Victor, never diss where you live. That's where you live. Never diss where you live.
Puerto Rico. I'm sorry. I gotta be honest right now. I gotta live my truth.
But the reason why I say that is because for the past some amount of years, I think that I have found a very comforting area in writing stories that take place in the city that I grew up in, which is the city of Mexicali. It's something that I never thought I was going to end up doing. It's something that I have found myself to be very fascinated with doing. It's just like writing and putting stories in a city that I think deserves a little bit more of a stronger spotlight. So, but yeah, that's who I am. And again, thank you for having me here.
No, we're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. And I got to tell you, everyone, why you're here. In a room with a phenomenological narratologist, a therapist, and a writer, it's important to know the common issue is lived life. And one of my great pleasures over the past 5 years, particularly with ReggieCon, is visiting cons and looking for authors who are selling their book. So, Vanessa, you'll remember we were at WonderCon. We did a book signing. We left, and I looked and saw who the next signer was, and it was Jose. So I went back and I talked to Jose, and he signed a copy for me, and I bought it. And I have to tell you, I've read it 3 times. It is one of the longer graphic novels that we've assigned, and I've enjoyed reading it 3 times because there are very intelligent, interesting bits at many different scales in the book. There's the longer story, and then there's just some great stuff we talked about earlier about Chelsea and Arsenal, and maybe Kurt Cobain and David Bowie, and maybe we'll bring that up later. But I could tell it was full of a lot of love, and that is fantastic. So, Jose, as I told you, you're going to be a little surprised by how we do this, because what we do is I asked each of the panelists to pick their favorite frame from the graphic novel. What I'm going to do is show you their frame. They're going to tell you why they love it. And then when they tell you why they love it, we're all going to talk about why we love it. And we're going to do that for a while. And as we do so, the story will become obvious through our conversation, but also the different sort of issues we want to talk about here, about inclusion, about diversity, about just loving and approaching difference is part of what we want to talk about here. So, like I said, I decided to go ahead and go with the story order, which means, I'm cheating myself already. I'm jumping ahead, Joe. You should tell me, Scott.
Oh,
thank people first, man.
Slow down now.
I got to thank the people that make us look like we know what we're doing, right? We look like we're having a chill conversation, and we are, but at the same time, this great work is going on behind the scenes. So Dr. Jenna Albrecht, who you met, she works in the Office of Enrollment Management and Academic Services and has been a strong advocate of ReggieCon since it started, and we wouldn't be where we are without her. Then Mr. Sean Thornton, he does all the amazing graphics, and of course came through again this time with this amazing illustration from inspired by Suncatcher. Dr. Danny Schroeder, she works in the advertising marketing office where Sean works, and we always appreciate her efforts on our behalf. And of course, Somer Simmons, she's the one who makes sure everybody knows where to be, when to be there, and all of the important dot connecting issues that make it so that I don't have to do that. And I very much appreciate you. And then this year, Dr. Kelly Harmon from Miss Kelly Harmon from my department is managing of the payroll for ReggieCon and making sure everybody gets paid. So these people are important. And again,
love you, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. Man, I can't tell you how many ways I say thank you to Kelly every day. I also just got to make clear that the funds that support ReggieCon and actually make it possible to do it the way we do it come from the Harold K. Sage Fund, which is an Illinois State University fund that I speak with every year about trying to be able to fund ReggieCon. And again, as I said, the Office of Enrollment Management and Academic Services, where Dr. Albrecht works, they always contribute. And then the Department of Psychology kicks in a little bit here just to make sure things get moving the right way. So thanks to them. And now I'm going to put Edcel on the spot. This is the frame that he picked. So he's going to explain to us why he picked that frame. Take your time, and then we'll all riff on what you say.
Sure. So it's quite funny because I chose the first page of the graphic novel, but again, it's not intentionally. Like, as I was reading the whole work, I was really inspired by Beatrice's journey throughout the whole, especially not only from the color scheme and kind of like how it starts as yellow, and throughout the graphic novel there's a lot of really interesting color choices within the background. But I think one of the most important things that I thought of this first page is the concept of home and identity, especially within Latinx literature. And depending from what perspective we tell the story, which is really interesting, how the topic, what's your story, but then we really want to think about, like, my concept of home, is it based on my parents' experience from the homeland? So for example, first and second generation narratives, and my expertise in Puerto Rican literature, like, and I'm just using this as an example, like, is my version of Puerto Rico my parents' version of Puerto Rico because they grew up on the island? Or as a first generation, is my version of Puerto Rico, as in, should I visit the island so I actually know and claim this is my version of the island, this is my lived experience? And I think that's something really beautiful within Latinx literature, just that concept of how we as individuals, as humans, while we have very complex lives and identities, I think searching for that experience and that identity that intertwines us with a culture and heritage is something very important, very meaningful. And the way we use media and literature to express that, I think it's so powerful. So that's one reason why I really love this first page and how it encompasses the whole graphic novel. The second thing is that I have a lot of friends from the music scene in Blue Note, and again, me myself, not a musician, but I bet all my friends would love this graphic novel so much because of how Beatrice found community linking back to Latinx literature, and how, you know, beautiful it has been with that journey, that infusion with music, and how the illustrations did a really excellent job portraying that. So I don't know, I just found it really emotional and really cool of how this all ties in together, and basically something to really look forward to as I was reading the whole graphic novel.
Love that.
That's fantastic. Anybody want to follow up on Edcel? Oh, by the way, Edcel, you weren't supposed to do a drop mic. Mic drop. on the
But
first.
it did.
You
I
know.
mean, come on. This is ReggieCon, what, year 5? You got to start off with the
strong
bar,
start. Yeah, strong
Yeah.
start right
There
there.
you go. Victor, you were
That's
gonna.
it.
Oh, sorry, Victor, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I was going to give all the flowers for, one in terms of the choice itself, but also the work on the page, is the idea of introducing the world of the story beyond like first focusing on a character. We're brought into an environment that we fully understand if you are of a particular age. I think that there's something kind of magical about that because it's daring you to connect with the concept of where this space is before we even know who we're talking to or about or anything else. But we have a simpatico because this is a familiar space, no matter where you are culturally, if you're of a certain time. Like, I think there's something very powerful in that showcase of world building and introduction, because again, like, I grew up here in Columbus, Ohio. I know this room. I've been in this room. I've had this room with, miscellaneous artistry strewn about, things that I'm going through in a way that, ironically, if my parents walked in, they don't understand why I've got these comic books folded over and I'm reading the creator notes so thoroughly.
Yeah.
I know this space. And for that to be the first page is a powerful introduction to the story that's getting ready to unfold. It's personal, and you get that right away.
I had that room too.
Right?
I mean, you're looking at a boombox, cassettes, right? And a guitar. And I felt home in an instant, to the point where I used to do stupid stuff like play an album. In my day, it was Kansas. And then I would have a tape recorder, and I would put it near the speaker, and then I would play an instrument at the same time.
There you go.
Could get myself on the track.
That's what I'm talking about.
Man, that's where the life lives. That's where it grows. That's fantastic. Yeah. So I was in the room on that one. Absolutely. Anyone else?
I would just add that to the point of cassettes, I had a moment of existential angst because I know what a cassette is, and I know a lot of students I teach don't know what a cassette is, and so I was like, I've reached that point in my life.
Yep.
But in all seriousness, I think something that Edcel that you mentioned in terms of like, your Puerto Rico versus your parents' Puerto Rico, I think in doing work in equity, diversity, and inclusion, part of what we sort of advocate for is that whatever your concept or whatever your home or whatever your narrative, it's equally as valuable. And I think that that's something throughout this story that I feel like I was following a thread of Beatrice basically making her, like, she's writing her own story in a way that sometimes her friends are like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She's still doing what she needs to do for herself and for, I would argue, her healing. I'm like getting into my own thing, but I appreciate what you said, because I think that where we get into spaces where people don't feel like included or like as if they belong, it's when someone tells you that your concept of Puerto Rico or your concept of your story or your concept of home is somehow incorrect. When I don't think that that's a thing. Your concept is yours and yours alone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Edcel. I thought you were going to say something.
Just to quickly jump in. Yeah, 100%. And I think what's really important is that everyone should know that their lived experience and narrative is valid. And again, just because you weren't born on the island, you were born somewhere else, that doesn't mean that you can't reclaim the identity or that suddenly you're not Puerto Rican. Like, again, that's the beauty of heritage. That's the beauty of culture. That's the beauty of learning about that. And that's something really important that I want everyone to know, that, yes, you can claim that. You can claim that aspect of home that is really precious to you. And I think that's really important to say out loud and tell everyone.
Particularly your kids, man. Go ahead, Jose.
Yeah, just to chime in, just because I really appreciate that take, and yeah, that is very much what I was going for with that page in and of itself, and it's just this idea of, I mean, you're right, it's the first page, and the idea there was just to set the world, and not just set the world, but also how does the world relate to the character that we're going to be following for a while. Which is, it sounds really obvious when you put it when I put it this way, but it's the main focus is discovering a person's artistry through music. And in that page, we're starting to see just how into music this character is. And the reason why that's important is because eventually, as the story moves forward, Beatrice is going to start finding friends through music, and is also starts discovering that community that she's a participant in. And so, even though the captions do say that when she's listening to music, she's home, but eventually it's also going to lead into the music scene that she's in. Yeah. That's her home. Like that's also where she is. And yeah, I mean, like it's also just like one of those things that, well, it's also like the bigger angle that I also wanted to go on is that Mexicali itself, being a border city, has a lot of culture clash. Like, and especially like, yes, because it's cassettes, it's kind of like a bigger hint that this like that the story is starting somewhere in the 90s. And I do think that this is important to note is that back in the when, before internet was as big as it is now, or as big or as prominent as it is now, media had a different role because you had to rely on whatever you could receive. So unless you had cable TV or satellite dish, most people living in Mexico were subject to TV that was national TV. But if you were on the border, you were also catching the TV signals from American towns across the border. So even if you didn't have cable TV or if you couldn't afford satellite television, you were still being influenced by any American broadcasting. And the reason why I think that is why that is significant is that American culture at that point was very much, not that there wasn't rock and roll music or anything or things like that in Mexico. There were, but the availability, like the accessibility, was different. So Beatrice is this girl who lives at the border, and she is already being influenced by the culture clash that is happening in her hometown, which is palpable and just like it is the day to day. So I wanted to like put in on that page just like as many references to. I mean, if you start looking for them, like there's British bands, there's American, there's hints to Americanisms, there's a Yellow Submarine somewhere in there. But there's also a lot of hints to Mexican pop music, yes, and Mexican rock music, which is sometimes its own genre because it uses traditional, rhythms, but with American influences, with California punk rock. So it's like, I wanted to like really cram all that in there just to really give you a sense that this is what Beatrice is taking in, and this is where Beatrice feels at home. It's just like this potpourri, if you will, of all these different influences, and that's going to take on as the story evolves. So, with this rich starting point for the story, Edcel, you mentioned claiming your identity. One of the things I loved about the story was just how damn hard it is, how much work she had to do to become the person that she thought she wanted to be, but maybe that wasn't who she ended up being. We often don't talk about psychological phenomena as work, and I think that's a very dangerous way to talk about it because we end up thinking psychological phenomena are just, I have a thought, and I can think myself out of this versus live myself differently. And so I love the fact that it's 100+ pages of living, and she's not a pleasant person. Let's make that clear. She's pushing everybody's buttons every chance she gets because she's going to write her damn song. You've all met people like that. Let's make it clear. I've met them, and yeah, exactly. I think we all might be that person in one domain or another. You're absolutely right. But nonetheless, these people hang together. So they take their differences and they find a way to negotiate the differences, and different people play different roles. I guess in the end, what I want to say is I just love the commitment and the honesty about work, because I think, and Vanessa, you can back me up or disagree, but I think we overcognize psychology. We act like we just got to think ourselves through it. And the point is you got to live it, and living is work day to day. And I loved that the story had that in there.
I'm here to back you up because yes, 100%. And I think what I also appreciate, and it's to the point that you just made, Jose, in terms of like that sort of culture clash. that creates additional work. You know what I'm saying? I think that I used to tell my clients this all the time, like this idea that you just got to be authentic and you just got to be who you really are.
Right.
That's easier for some people because my authentic self is frowned upon, is side-eyed, people are mad at me, whatever. That's where the work is. And I think that I don't think people understand how much of a privilege it is to sort of live authentically and without, you know what I'm saying? And that's what I can appreciate about what you said, Scott, is that takes work. And so I think even in our ways of being with one another, when we're maybe like counseling or talking to a friend, we have like Beatrice, like sometimes just saying like, you just got to do you and be you. Sounds very simple, but it's not easy.
Right.
No, she pays a price for it more than once.
Exactly. This story beautifully displayed that.
Okay, so I got to say one thing more because we're talking about this aspect of the story.
Yeah.
What I love is the generational challenge. Yeah. Because the idea that her father curses her with a burden.
Grandfather.
Her grandfather curses her with a burden. And then later on, the quote unquote audience challenges that burden. And, you know, for me, it's identity struggle and it's work and it's all work. And the pacing of how that challenge plays out is as the phenomenological narratologist would say, masterful. Right. So I just love the generational challenge that was put in there. I thought it was very important.
Yeah. And it's, you know, on that topic, I mean, like, it is something that, I mean, we don't have to play the game. We don't have to play the game of guessing everybody's age here, but that is also something that, you know, like even at my age, it's something that I wish I had a more definitive outlook on, but I unfortunately I don't, and I think about that very, very, very regularly of like, what is our responsibility to pass down, or what is and when something has been passed down to you, what is your responsibility to carry that? Whether or not it's a good thing or a difficult thing or a preferred thing. And, you know, of course, it would be a lot easier to just say different stories for different blokes, but like we all know that it's a little bit tougher for that. So the story beginning with like this very specific curse, and it starts off very noble, right? Of just like, it's, you know, it starts off very noble and almost this call to heroics of you are going to save your grandfather's soul.
Yes.
But eventually, and this is not a spoiler, I don't think, but like we also see that the repercussions for that starts being unhealthy obsession. It starts being alienation. It starts being this. I mean, Beatrice is not. I don't want to call her tempestuous. But she is determined, and she is persistent. However, if anyone guesses the difference between being perseverant and being stubborn, well, then by all means. But it is precisely that, you know, that situation that she's in. Also, like, let's not forget, she's a teenager. I mean, like, it's a very difficult, you know, position to be in. And that also kind of puts her in. That also puts her to make the decision of how she wants to enact about this. And she makes it very clear that she wants to make the best thing possible because it will save someone. And again, on a level that is an honorable thing to do, of like, you know, what is it to save someone that important to you? But on the other side is, what is it costing you? And like, and what would be the repercussions for that? Read the book and you'll find out. But yeah, I mean, like it is something that even to this day, as someone who grew up in Mexico, who now lives in the US, this is something that I still carry with me of like, what is my responsibility to my heritage? What is my responsibility to my culture? And what is my responsibility to sustain that, or to continue to advocate for that, or to continue to talk about that? And I keep hearing my ancestors calling me in the back of the head, being like, are you doing enough? And most people would say, well, you do as much as you can. but it's just not that easy.
No. It's all work all of the time.
Yeah, it's all work all the time, and it's Vanessa kind of pointed it out, quite straight up. If like, yeah, if it were easier, well, then it wouldn't be that much work. And some people just don't have like yeah, I mean, identity is not that clear cut. It just isn't. It's a mixture of a lot of things. So, anyways, not to go too much into that, but yeah.
No, that's why we're here. That's precisely why we're here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my frame because it takes place a little later in the story, and I will tell you that I'm not going to say I'm a musician, but I'm going to say I'm someone who plays instruments.
Technically, neither am I, but yeah.
The phenomenology, the living experience I see expressed in this page is it. That's what you work for. Now, in psychology, a psychologist by the name of Csikszentmihalyi called this flow.
Right.
And when you get into a flow state, what it means is that you lose your sense of self, you lose your sense of an individual causing events to happen, and you start to feel like things are just coming out of you. And the creativity is just coming. So I'm sure, Victor, as a writer, you've written stuff and you get into a state, and then suddenly words are just coming. And then you go back a week later and you say, damn, I wrote that.
Yeah.
And I wrote that. Where'd that come from? And that moment, the moment I'm showing you here is all work. You don't get to that moment by thinking about it. You get to that moment by doing. And you've got this moment so nailed that this middle frame basically has her fingers flying in ways that she doesn't consciously know what her fingers are doing, right? That's what the work is. Jimi Hendrix could play 32 notes a second because of the work. And getting to the moment where it's coming out of you is a moment of not I, right? It's what Csikszentmihalyi would call the flow. Time contracts, your sense of agency dissipates, and you work very, very hard to get there. So in the second frame, we're looking at that state from the perspective of time and her body moving faster than she can consciously imagine. And that's why it's got the double hand, the double fingering. And then in the very next page, she's like, what the hell? Right? She's got a look of wonder on her face, but her eyes are rolling back in her head too. And I think that's terribly important, because when you see someone who's caught in a moment of flow, they're not looking at anything anymore. Jimi Hendrix is not looking at his hands. Stevie Ray Vaughan is not looking at his hands. Mozart was not looking at his hands. He was in a state of glory that came from the hours and years of work that had to happen for him to be able to do that. So to be able to capture the eyes rolling back in the head is, I think, what a lot of people miss. You're losing yourself, but you're losing yourself in something bigger than yourself that you've worked an incredibly long time to be able to produce. So I absolutely love this page, to the point where I could frame that, put it in my wall. And if people want to understand what I feel like when I've written a new song, when the lyrics come, when I played that guitar solo in a way I can't believe I did, that's what it is. So I very much appreciate you creating that page. And I said, damn, I have felt like that in my life.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with the book The Element by Ken Robinson. But it's a great book that basically just talks about that, of like when someone discovers their element, when someone discovers like what is that thing that just connects you. And I hope this doesn't come a little frou-frou new agey, no disrespect to that, but like it is that sense of when you're doing something and you're just one with the universe. Like you're just like you're just so honed in. Yeah, the flow is a term that I've heard kind of coined for that. I remember a professor back when I was in school kind of gave us the example because we were 90s kids, of just of anyone telling us, whenever you watch a Bulls game and just take a look at how Michael Jordan is playing, And he's just doing things that you just don't know where the ball begins and where his hand is, and where his hand ends. And very much in that same, very much that same practice with a lot of musicians. And as someone who has gone to a lot of music shows, you just see it. Like you know when you see it, when someone is just in their element, honed in this performance, in this experience, and just creating something that it's inexplicable. It is a very specific feel, and if you're ever there, it can happen through anything. It happens through writing, through drawing, through walking, through through other forms of discovery, or through other forms of activities. And that is something that I was trying to grasp. And the reason why I drew it the way that I did, I have this friend, we've been colleagues for some time, and they gave me one of the biggest compliments that I didn't even know that I needed to hear, but it has now become like one of my, it became like a guiding light specifically for Suncatcher. Like many music aficionados, and I wouldn't call myself a musician, but like I'll pick up anything with strings and I love to make noise. But like many music aficionados, I always love to draw fan art of bands and draw musicians. And I would just draw it like the way that I did. And this friend of mine was always looking at my sketches, and they said, I love the way that you draw musicians because they look so alive, like they look like in such motion. And again, like it was just something that they mentioned in passing, but it just became like, okay, that's the most flattering comment that I've heard. It's definitely something that I want to keep doing. Want to keep doing. So how do I do that? And then the rest of it just became practice of like, how do I make that happen? So when it came into drawing Suncatcher, like I knew that was something that I needed to put a lot of attention to. Of like, how do I draw the moments, the specific moments in the story where the music is so intense and so important and so significant that it has to be alive. Versus other moments where they're just sitting and talking, or they're just walking down the street, and not that there's, not to downplay those moments, but really to emphasize that aspect of when you're doing that thing that you love so much, it just feels different. I wish I had a different word for feel, but I think that it's kind of like it kind of operates with what we're talking about, of like when you're in that flow, or when you're in that experience. So.
Well, your comment about feeling connected to everything is absolutely on target. Don't mean to nerd out neurologically, but usually we're so tight focusing on things that our brains are in very specific states. Sure. And what expert meditators are able to do is actually decenter their thoughts, right? And they do it by focusing on something very, very hard for a long time and then letting it go. And what this does is actually put your brain in states that are similar to having your brain on LSD, which means that a lot of the connections between areas are calmed down so that a lot of things can happen in your brain that are not allowed to happen as you live your daily life, going here, going there, and having to focus. So in that moment, I'm not saying she's on LSD. I'm not saying she's meditating, but what I'm saying is her existence is a little less constrained.
Right.
And it's in those moments when you lose yourself, when you do have this awe of people report being part of everything. I think you nailed it with that description.
Yeah, and just to like even add more to that, like because I, as you may have guessed, like a very energetic person, like that's just like it's kind of like a golden retriever that way. But so you can imagine when I was younger, I was like really running up and down, running up and down. Anyways, there were times when overwhelmness would be very obvious, and I've had many people, wisely advised of like, have they ever tried meditating? And that always kind of felt like, I don't think that's for me. But then they would start describing like what the goal of meditation were, or like what the purpose of it, and just like what it, based on their experiences, what meditation could help achieve. And then I would just think about, I was like, oh, I know that feeling. Like, exactly. I don't like that's exactly how I feel when I'm on a very long walk, or that's exactly how I feel when I'm drawing this much, or like sometimes that's exactly how I feel when I'm like, whenever I'm practicing on an instrument and I just really start getting into that flow of like, Oh yeah, no, I know that feeling. So it's
Yeah.
not that I need to sit and meditate, even though that would be good. But it's more of like I just have other activities that help me get there.
Yep.
But the goal is the same, or not the goal, but the state is the same. Yeah, it's not a goal. It's, the state is the same thing.
Glorious. Anyone else want to comment on what we've been discussing?
One thing I'll say.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
go. Oh,
No. Ladies first. Ladies first. Come on.
Okay. One thing that I was gonna say, and I think Joe, you just referenced it in terms of the perspective taking, I think is important, right? Because Scott, what you're describing as flow, what we're describing as these sort of out of body experiences, someone from a certain perspective would describe as pathological or psychotic, right? And I think where we run into issue, particularly in the systems and structures that would define it as pathological, is that we don't make space for those other ways of understanding those feelings. Like there are points in the story, right, where Beatrice is like, people are looking at her like, you are not okay.
Right.
Whereas again, like you just referenced Michael Jordan, he probably had, experiences in his life where you're working out too much, you're doing this, you're doing that. And so how do we make those distinctions? And I would argue that it's easier for some people to be allowed to have those experiences while others are labeled as, again, pathological or obsessed. And so I think that I appreciate what you're sharing about those constraints on our ways of being in existence, because sometimes those constraints are societal. And so I think that we can't negate that either. You know what I'm saying?
100%. I mean, if there's something that I think that we need better systems for, is the room for exploration, and just like and the room and the space for someone to find what is that path that someone would need to carve for themselves in order to find that element. And yes, I mean, we don't have the time to get into it, but like systemically, it's gotten very difficult, and for a number of reasons. But just think about, of like how many people sometimes have to turn away from even the opportunity of discovering their element because there is no permissibility to do so. And that is detrimental. Absolutely.
It's detrimental at the individual level, and it's detrimental at the cultural level. One of the big revelations we will become consciously aware of in the next 4 years is the damage we've done to exactly what you said, the ability to explore, by defunding, basically privatizing higher education.
Yeah.
We have made it practically impossible for people to explore themselves. And on the one hand, people of an individualist bent can say, well, so what? They got to work hard, they got to make it. But what they don't understand is that culture is so much more likely to succeed with diversity. Culture is so much more likely to succeed with people expressing difference and actually exploring how to be in this space. So we've been culturally giving ourselves a lobotomy for about 50 years, right? And I do think that part of our current reckoning, our current awakening, is becoming aware of what we have let happen to our infrastructure for 50 years. And if that was political, well, it was. But I also think it's descriptive.
Yeah.
Right? We have changed the world of exploration for generations.
Yeah. And again, like, just to throw like very big generic examples, like I'm quoting from someone else's anecdote, but the story of a girl who just had a very hard time staying still and was just being very difficult in class. And then when taken to see a professional, the professional just told the mom, "You have a dancer on your hands. Like don't put, like, she's fine. Just take her to dancing classes." And there you go. And a similar example was someone who was, same thing, unable to stand still, always causing a ruckus. And someone said, like, "Have you taken him to stand-up comedy classes? Like, it's just give him a mic and put him on stage, and it'll be fine." And from a personal experience, man, I was, again, a blabbermouth. But it wasn't until someone gave me a journal and someone gave me a journal or a drawing pad I was like, oh, I could just draw these things out, right? And again, like, because someone carved that, because someone assisted me for that, and that became a resource. But and not to get too negative on it, but like, think of all the people who have not had that, and then before we know, we start considering everything that we've lost. Anyways,
no, it's not negative; it's descriptive, right?
So,
we've lost, and on that note, we're going to move to Vanessa's frame. This frame is not about loss, but so Vanessa, please give us a little backstory on what's going on here and why you love this frame.
Okay, so the word that immediately, like, I had like literal chills. I think a tear might have come out of my eye, like just one solitary tear, because I'm like a gangster. But I would say this in a word to me is liberating, because I think that to this point in the story, when we see Beatrice playing, it's very, like, we see that, to me, there were like horror elements to that, right? Like, we see all the fingers and it's very like intense. I would say, I think tense is the word I would use. It's very tense, it's very focused. And in this, we see her face is relaxed. I think the way her hair is drawn is beautiful. Like, I want to be able to do this with my hair, like a hair flip that's just so perfect. It is so beautiful. And the cranes that we see around her. And I think that not only for her to get to this point in the creation of the song, but I think to what we were talking about earlier, I can align with what it feels like to have the weight of your ancestors on you, right? Like, you need to do this for them. They worked so hard for you. And feeling every day like whatever you do is not enough. Feeling every day like I gotta keep going. I gotta keep grinding. I gotta keep grinding. And one thing for me that has been liberating over the past year is that who I am is enough. Me existing is enough. And I am, my ancestors' wildest dreams. And I think this moment, this page for me, so beautifully captured that in her story, right? Like, she just looks so free, so relaxed. And I know that song is a banger. Like, I don't know, but I know that song is a banger just because of the way that she just, to me, this is emancipation. This is liberation. This is authenticity. This is walking in your truth, like personified on a page. So thank you for this. This is going in my office in a frame.
There you go.
Because this is
I did try to play one of your music scores on my piano, by the way.
Before I talk a little bit about that, it's just like, I mean, look, there's a reason why throughout the entire book I never say what genre of music they play, and I think that is, that is like deliberate. Of like, I think I want the reader to be imagining like the music that they want. So I mean, like, it's supposed to be that way. But thank you for choosing this page. I mean, like, it's for anyone who hasn't read it yet, spoiler alert, but this is like a big moment in the story where Beatrice comes to a very crucial decision, and she says something just before this happens. She said something that it's a very deliberate line. It's a very specific line, because throughout the entire book, it's all, it's even in the pitch, right? Of like, the only way to liberate her grandfather was by playing the song that he never wrote. And then this happens. Again, I'm not going to give you the spoilers, but then this happens. And to me, it was very important to depict this with every sense of serenity, every sense of subtleness, but every sense of, liberation and calmness, but also, okay, fine. Spoiler alert, if everybody covered their ears for the next 10 seconds, that's not metaphorical fire. That's, this is not a metaphor. This is, everything that is happening there is very, very literal. And just to compare it to the previous pics that we saw where she's playing super fast, in this one, she's in that state. She's in that flow. She's there passively. Nothing is moving super fast. In fact, everything around her is what is causing the moment, and she's just centered and focused. And yeah, I mean, if I didn't feel that this was a bit of a spoiler, like I would have used this for so much of the promotional material back when I was promoting the book on its first instances. But no, yeah, it's also one of my favorite pages, and I know exactly where I was when I drew this, when I colored this. So I'm glad that you like it. Thank you. But yeah, I threw so much at that. So yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah. So what I love about this one as the connection to the last panel from Scott's to this, the flow state that I would call that she's achieving is ecstasy.
Right.
And a lot of people would kind of put like a sexual idea on that. And if you do, that's cool because this is a point of release in that sense. And there's something beautiful about what ecstasy is actually supposed to represent. It is this sense of pleasure that you can get lost in that other people from their outside may not understand exactly why you're driven to this space, why this is what's calling you, why this is something that you're passionately pursuing under any circumstance. And for her, getting lost to it, I think, is the thing that makes it so beautiful. When you had the eyes rolling up, that was her tapping it for the first time. Here, she's finally surrendered to it and has achieved exactly what it was that she needed to. To a more pop cultural parlance, this is a Miles Morales Across the Spider-Verse moment. This is, I'm telling my story now. Like I'm not living for other people. I'm going to live for me. And now look at what I've achieved. It is something where, you know, I don't want to spoil what my thing is, but this is such a powerful moment of surrender through the acceptance of self and identity and being. She has now achieved something far greater than she might have even anticipated for the release that she's trying to affect for others.
Also, this is something that I rarely talk about, but I'm gonna take the opportunity. And yes, I 100% agree with you, Victor, on that. But like something that I rarely talk about is just and I don't know if this may sound a little pretentious, but I'll just go on ahead and say it because I put way too much thought into as much visuals throughout the book as possible. You know, even to the thing of like what poster is in the background, and yes, what T-shirts are they wearing. So for anyone who hasn't read the book, when that scene is happening, Beatrice is wearing this shirt that it's a music note that it has like the cliffs, but on the cliff there's also like little stick figures, like little hangmen, and above it it says Requiem. And this is and the reason why I chose that shirt is for a couple of reasons. One, Requiem was a band when I was in high school. I had a couple of friends that were in this band called Requiem, and they were a progressive rock band. So I just kind of like that idea of like, what is progressive? Well, you know, it's that idea of just like doing a bunch of other things in music specifically, progressive music. But also, you know, and again, spoilers for those who have not read the book. Sorry, you're here. But at this point in the story, Beatrix is in a very specific stage with her friends, specifically her band, which is a quintet. There's 4 in there. There's 4 notes in there. So her actions have taken her to this point where she has put herself in a position that, yes, like I try to like to put as much load into the imagery of like, look what you've done, look what you have placed yourself, and yet this is where your actions have taken you. So so yeah, I mean, like it's also something that like I spend way too much time thinking of like, well, if that in this point in the story, what T-shirt are they wearing? Like, what are they wearing? What are they symbolizing right now? And fun fact for anyone who reads the book, there is a character who always has something resembling the number 3 on his shirts. Like he's always wearing something with the number 3, whether it's the band Thrice or some other symbol that just has like something that points like a 3-pointed star. Like there's always the number 3 for him. And then when you get to the end of the story, you know why. So it's almost as if like it was always there, kind of thing. But yeah, in that particular segment of like the shirt that she's wearing, it's a Requiem shirt, which is and also, you know, what is a Requiem, but anyway. So,
No, it's fantastic.
not to be too
Nah, do that. That's awesome.
not to be too on the nose about it, but
No, it's fantastic, and it's there in the work, and it's not over the head. It's what the work is, and I just for those that haven't studied or don't think about these kind of things too often, she doesn't get there by thinking about it. She gets there by doing it.
right.
And she's probably surprised after she's in this state that she was in that state.
Yeah.
If you've ever done a good jam with a band, you're like, damn, where the hell did that come from? Right. Because it's not about conscious control. It is, as Victor said, it's about a release, but it's not a quitting. It's a working to a point where, boom, better things, more sophisticated things can come to be. So it's all there. So look, I got 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. Janet, do we have any quick questions? I know we got to go to Victor, but just want to make sure we got our time managed.
We don't have any so far.
All right. Well, those of you out there, we'll answer your questions, and you know that they'll be fantastic answers. So don't be scared to ask. So what we're going to do now is move on to Victor's frame.
Yes,
I did not draw that.
Yeah, you did. You drew it all.
So
This is
yeah,
no. This is
right
how I
color
felt.
palette though. Like it is
How I felt about it.
It's the right color palette. So I think you might have me confused with someone else.
Scotty's desktop. That's what it is.
Oh, okay.
No, am I showing the wrong thing? You guys?
You're totally showing your desktop.
Yeah.
Oh, damn, y'all. Tell me fast.
That's
it was too funny. The joke.
That's why I was making all these jokes.
All right, you heartless people. I'm gonna edit that whole thing out of the video. Y'all making fun of me, man. Go ahead. There's your image.
Yes.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
So I chose this one towards the end of the book because this entire story was so very oddly personal to me. As a creator who I came into comics due to a family member and their push. I first came into comics wanting to draw. And when I first discovered comics at the ripe age of 10, I found out that 3 of my uncles could draw and were, wanting to get into comics. But due to the fact that when they were growing up, comics were made in New York City, and them, just like me, grew up here in Columbus, there is a disconnect. There's a lack of availability for them to pursue that. And the youngest of my uncles was the one that really kind of took a shine to my interests and said, you're going to figure out how you're going to do something in this comic book industry that we've all wanted to do, but never figured it out. You're going to be the one to figure it out. And unfortunately, much in the same way, like the parallels of this story to me were deep. They cut deep. My uncle was a victim of violent crime like a year later. And so I made a vow by candlelight, very Peter Parker, very Batman, that I was going to be something in comics for the honor of my uncle, to save his soul, so to speak. And here, this kind of created a culmination of a space to me where I understand very clearly how that sense of dedication for someone else towards something can be dangerous. This sense of passion can get so overwhelming, so engulfing, that it literally can destroy you. And for a long time, for a very, very long time, I would kind of teeter on where I wanted to be as a creator. I didn't go full-time into it right away. I worked in the private sector for a while. I went to cons on the weekends. I was a hobbyist. I was miserable doing that because I ultimately was scared of losing myself to my passion in this way. So this was something that, again, recognizing that, this could be something that is so overpowering. This is what's been driving me since I was 10 years old. And I need this and I want this so very badly. When I finally recognized that sense of flow, that is absolutely the space that will make me the happiest, that I need to go ahead and let it burn. I need to risk getting burned to see what exactly I can achieve, not just in honor of my uncle, but for myself. What is it that I really want? Do I really want this? Absolutely. Did I had a cushy state job and was making good money doing very little work. but it wasn't the thing that fulfilled my soul. I needed something that would literally light that fire. The thing that I love here, though, more than anything, is the idea of the play me another becomes this thing where the question is it supernatural or is it interpersonal? Is that really her coming out saying, you've done it once, now you want it so much, you got to do it again, keep it going. Every time I've written a book and it's come out, there's a moment where I'm like, this is absolutely amazing. And then I put that book down and I try to do it again. Because I can't rely on what was my song. I have to write the next one. I have to write the new one. And just seeing this is that embodiment of that feeling that I don't know how many people actually have felt and understood what that is, and bring that from the inside to the outside. And I think you did that so wonderfully that's why I had to pick that one.
Yeah. There is that, like, there is that play me another one, right? I mean, like, it's again, this is something that I mention whenever I'm talking to people about the book and, like, trying to convince them to go get a copy. It's just there is a dark side to creativity, unfortunately, which is, for lack of a better term, the unhealthy obsession, which can be very self-inflicting harm or destructive to, or even destructive. So in this point of the story, I mean, like, it's, if she were to agree to play another, like, that would mean staying in that shack and catching on fire, and literally her friends are coming in and be like, we're gonna pull you out of this because otherwise your life is at stake here. And I mean, the book is not autobiographical, but it is very personal of talking about how I've approached art throughout my career, and how sometimes, I really do need those friends. And let me rephrase that. I'm very fortunate to have those friends who sometimes they come in and we're like, we're going out, and you're coming. Like, it's like, take a break. Otherwise, like, your body cannot sustain this. And if you don't, so there are a lot of elements to that. I mean, it took me a very long time to learn lessons like that, because like, we don't have to get into, like, what sometimes being in a competitive field can get you to do. There is this unfortunate, very common practice, predominantly when you're young, that the one who spins their wheels the most is the one who will go furthest. And then it doesn't, and then a few years down the line, you just go like, well, just because you're spinning your wheels doesn't mean that you're going anywhere, first of all. And secondly, just because you want to see how far you would go, that doesn't mean that it's the right places to go. So, I mean, the cliche is correct. Take some time to smell the roses, like pause for a little bit. But in that moment, in the scene of, like, she has achieved something, and then there's that choice of, do you want to go again? And you can clearly see that if it were her, maybe she would have made that choice. Like, maybe she would have just stayed in that shack and, like, just be pleased that she liberated. And now I'm getting into spoiler territory. But anyway, so,
well, we're here for the dark side, man. Let's make it clear. All right, we're here for all of it. So I mean, and it's all there.
I mean, go ahead.
No, part of me wants to channel Vanessa's existential side for a moment, because for me, I have been very ambitious as a psychologist, as a writer, as a cognitive scientist, as a philosopher, and I'm constantly working.
Right.
But it doesn't feel like work to me. And it's had impacts on my wife. It's had impacts on my kids. So the house is always burning, man. I mean, it's so what I'm saying there is, when I read this, on the one hand, it can be said that I didn't experience those friends as saving her, I experience those friends as burning because of her.
Mhm.
In other words, they were in pain. They went into the
Yeah.
fire. Now they went in there to save her, but you know, I've moved my family because of my job. I've left my wife home with a 3-year-old for 6 months while I took the 7-year-old overseas because there was an opportunity I wasn't going to miss. And at the same time, as people, some people would have rather I just stayed and burned, to be honest. But my point is, if you're going to be ambitious, if you're going to be a creative, that's where you're living all the time.
Mhm.
And the trick is for me is to have the honest conversations with the people that are burning with me, you know, and what am I giving you in return? How am I helping you get what you want? And then I'm just going to say it. My kids get to see what it means to live a life of meaning.
Right.
My kids get to see what it means and what it costs. And that's why I keep talking about work, what it costs to get where you want to go. And it's not the yellow brick road, man. It's day-to-day compromise among the things I'm trying to make happen and the things other people want to try to make happen. And that doesn't stop. I'm just saying. I love the scene. I felt it a bit differently because those people are burning as well as saving. And that's very much a part of how I've experienced a lot of my decisions in relation to my family. Yeah.
Can I add a point about the friends? Because I would say too, I appreciate the decision to have the friends sort of be there at this pivotal moment, because I think, and this is me speaking as a woman of color, I think we're oftentimes heralded as being very resilient. Yes, and I'm tired. You know what I'm saying? And I think the fact that her friends and I won't even say in spite of, I would just say, you know, she was being difficult, and I don't think anybody would have batted an eye if they was like, girl, you going through something, we gonna go over here. They didn't know. And I think that what Carl Rogers would call unconditional positive regard. I won't necessarily use that language, but again, we love you whether you're difficult or not.
Right.
That to me was so powerful, because again, she probably and absolutely could have gotten herself out of that burning building, and just because she could have doesn't mean she had to. And I think that is, I love the inclusion of them in this scene, because I also think that this is just a both and moment to me. Like, she is achieving something as an individual that is so beautiful that no one outside of her can understand. And there were people there that care about her. And I don't want to say in spite of, but you know what I'm saying? Like, they love the totality of her. And I think that was so beautiful.
Yeah, I mean,
oh, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I want to challenge something that there is a context of what we understand based on what we see, and then what could be that we don't see. And my question is it possible, whether through deliberate intentionality or not, that the presence of the friends is actually a hindrance to her safety versus the other space? If in the sense of her flow and creating this fire, she actually was made safe, the presence of her friends, did that get her burnt? That's a existential question that I immediately took, right? Because she was fine before they got there. They didn't necessarily understand what the fire was, how it was working. And I would also argue, when they tore the cord, that is the part where she got hurt. That is the part where they interrupted her fire. You know, there was an aspect of rebirth that she was engaging in that they might have actually thrown off with their presence, their interjection, their lack of vision and understanding of what she was doing. And obviously we have the opportunity to ask Jose right now, is that possible? But I almost don't even want you to answer that question.
Well said.
Because it allows for that open-endedness of consideration, that when somebody else reads it, if they see, like, you know what, they didn't save her because of them, she is in a state where potentially she can never return to that flow. And now that's a very interesting
Damn,
context.
Victor. laying down that dark side
sorry.
clearly,
Let me
man.
bring it back. Let me bring it back.
No,
I'm sorry.
no.
I'm here for
No,
it. Go ahead, Jose.
I like where you're going with that. And I mean, you're not wrong, and you are kind of hitting something that I do think that is part of it, that is a very integral part of this, of like, is a piece of art worth your well-being? I don't answer that. Like, I mean, like, it's because, you know, let's just say for argument's sake that your take is very much on point, definitely going as like, yeah, she would never be able to return to that, you know, to that state. But also, who's to say that she would survive that, you know, that she would survive that fire?
True.
And I guess
Yes.
that kind of poses the question of, if she were to have created this amazing piece of art that no one else hears, no one else knows that it existed, but she created this amazing song, that it is amazing because it does what it had to do.
Burns the house down. Come on.
I mean, it burns the house down. But if it would have come at the expense of her life, I don't know if I want to advocate for that, because
go ahead.
Yeah, because again, like, and I kind of bring this back into like, that is the dangerous side of obsession, is that it can be it can be inflicting of something very dangerous. And not to get too sidetracked for this, but I also do think that there is something to be said of like, something that happens to a lot of artists is that we are, you know, a lot of us do operate where it's like, it's all for the sake of the art, for the sake of the art. And that is fertile ground for vulnerability. That is fertile ground for exploitation. That is fertile ground for unnecessary ground of competition. I mean, we have a situation here in Los Angeles because everyone thinks that writers are just going to write no matter what, and some of them will, but now we know that it's unsustainable. So, but if someone were to tell you like, yeah, but if you write it though, and it's so amazing, wouldn't it be worth it though? Like, I'm not sure.
Well, I dig you're not being sure. And this is why I said I was going to channel Vanessa's existentialism here, because Mozart was a cheating drunk. Yet I'll listen to Mozart's music every day. Stevie Ray Vaughan was addicted to drugs, and I will listen to his music every day. So in that moment of listening, I am not advocating. I am simply reveling in the beauty of the creation. And for me, when people ask me, is it worth it? That's not a framing of life that I bring to my life. I don't bring that to the value of others' work. It is what it is. And so it is what it is, and I'm going to listen to Mozart forever. And the word requiem is Mozart's requiem,
right? And also like, and also, I mean, like, I also do believe this in my heart of hearts. It's like, everybody's threshold is different. Everybody's working method is completely different. You know, like, some people are perfectly comfortable and at home creating art 15 hours a day, and they keep a very healthy schedule about that. And then others can barely get through a session of half a day's art piece and still create beautiful art that way. I don't think that there's a wrong answer, but I do think that there can be a dangerous one, or a difficult one.
It is. And that's
I mean, it's Kurt Cobain, right? I mean, he flew so close to the sun. He melted his wings. He did. And it is not necessarily the art that is produced, but the artistry of understanding how to toe that line that actually makes us the best creatives we can be. You know, there's something intrinsically tragic about what happened with Kurt Cobain, but then there's also something so empowering because he never outlived his voice. He flew so far, he never outlived his voice. And that's a dangerous thing. Like that's something that, especially in a field like music and how genres change, like he was at the epitome of this genre concept, embodied every aspect of it, and
he was the concept.
Yeah, because there's a good chance that, as we were talking about earlier, he might not have evolved like Dave Grohl could. And there's a good chance that if he was still here, Dave Grohl wouldn't have become Dave Grohl.
Oh man, it's
So there's this thing, you know what I'm saying? Like it is that's the thing that I think is the beauty of this book and that particular scene is where you are determines what you understand is happening. Either the danger or the rebirth of self and the conflict that the friends somewhat inadvertently engineered towards her by interrupting what that was. I mean, she could have been in a Kafka moment, and they interrupted her Mighty Morphin transformation. You know what I mean? So and because you interrupted the transformation, that's what got her end result. Like there is so much there in just those last few pages. That's a course. Like I just
fantastic.
I will say.
So let me just quickly say, Vanessa, you go ahead.
Yes.
Jose, quick response, and then I got a question that we got to answer. So, Vanessa.
Okay, to be very quick, I am going to channel my existential side to the point that you're making. The only thing that is certain is what's happening right now. All of those what ifs are uncertain, and so when we say to be present in the moment, I would say as an existentialist, I'm not saying that as I'm saying that because what is right now is what's certain.
That's right.
And let's live our life based on what's certain. Okay, that's all I want to say.
Jose.
No, I mean, I don't think I have much of a follow-up after that. I mean, other than just agreeing and then just kind of seeing it of that's the difficulty. Like that's the difficulty, especially for something as abstract as music making, right? It's it is that thing of just like, you're never gonna know, but also take care of yourselves, be healthy.
Yes,
drink water.
Drink water. Talk to your friends. Go, go to therapy. But also like at this point in her life, Beatrix is going through something completely different, and I mean, like it's just good to have those kinds of friends that are like, she's being a jerk, but I'm worried about her. We gotta go check on her. And
that's my jerk, though.
What I really love about the conversation here is usually when we talk about creativity and things like depression or anxiety, we romanticize. So Kurt Cobain gets romanticized in terms of you wouldn't have the music if you didn't have the depression, you wouldn't have and I like the complexity we're generating here because it doesn't collapse into one single explanation. So we have a question from Michael Dow. Question for all panelists. Is there a place you can go that brings out your creativity, whether it be physical place, a memory, or a state of mind? And then Heather Leary, if you were typing a question, please type it again because I can't see it.
Who wants to go first?
I can go first. It's actually interesting thinking about physical place, memory, and state of mind. I think about this a lot, especially when I was writing my poetry for my last chapbook. A lot of it was memory and a lot of it was trauma related, which was quite difficult to bring back. And actually, Suncatcher did remind me a lot of that too, but I'll go there in a minute. So basically, at least with my chapbook poetry, it did require me to remember how I remembered Hurricane George that happened way back in 1999. And then my most recent one, Maria, back in 2017, because I was there with my mom and experiencing all that. And even though I wasn't there for Fiona, I got the perspective of an outsider or part of the Puerto Rican diaspora. As in, I wasn't there for my family. I couldn't help them, so I felt useless. The same feeling all my friends expressed when they were doing their internships or they were in the States while I was on the island. So it's really interesting to think about writing space because if it is like trauma-based, it is healing once you go and revisit that trauma, but at the same time, getting there's the extra challenge and actually putting all those feelings to word is like an extra challenge in itself. And the reason why that Suncatcher also reminded me of that is because one thing I identify with Beatrice is that and I don't know if this is the right term, but I like to think of generational trauma and kind of like how in a lot of Latinx literature, our parents want us to live their dreams, what they couldn't achieve during their prime. And in Beatrice's case, she really had this objective that she wanted to free her grandfather's soul. And she said this a lot for the graphic novel, which is why I think that first few panels of the crane was so important, like her wanting to build that crane before her grandfather passed away. And then, well, unfortunately, he did pass away before showing the crane. I see that journey of her wanting to write the song, not only for herself, but it got to a point where it also involved like, I want to save my grandfather's soul. I want to achieve what he couldn't finish. So I feel like that relates a lot with the healing process of writing in itself, because again, we also have to remind ourselves that we're doing this, well, for us, for our own writing, first and foremost. And again, once we realize that, the whole healing process will come and follow forward towards that.
That's fantastic. Look, it's 22 after. I'm going to ask a favor. I'm going to ask the panelists if they'd be willing to stick around for an extra 5 minutes or so, because we've got more questions.
Yeah,
and,
bring it. Yeah,
people are bringing them out. So
great.
Andy said, well, actually, Renee Plank raised her hand. I don't know how long that's been flashing on my screen. So Renee Plank, if you want to ask a question, maybe Jana or Summer, if you could engineer it such that maybe, again, I don't know how long that's been blinking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Andy's question. And if Jana and or Summer can work it out how we address Renee's hand, we'll go from there. So Andy asks, many of the panelists have talked about feeling a sense of responsibility to carry on cultural traditions, customs of their heritage. How would you say that this ties into art, specifically with regard to the concept that you were just talking about, self-destruction or over-absorption?
That's a big one. I will speak from being an African-American creator and the expectation of creating with a representational voice. It happens. I can tell you that the harshest critics that I've ever had were people in the Black community, by way of either what I did create or more specifically what I didn't create, for them, to them, by them, however, which is a very taxing sort of situation. I create because I want to create what I want to create. That is the liberating truth of my artistry. I don't create necessarily to satisfy what others want, though I do hope that I find an audience. There's a difference between those two ideals. But when it comes to carrying the essence of culture, that becomes something that's a little tedious at times. A Black creator is what I am, it's not necessarily who I am. So I may make something that does speak to and easily identifiable by Black audiences, but I may make something that is totally left to center of what you would presume is Black comics. And that's just as okay, because it's my authentic creative truth. And being able to balance that, I think I have gained a sense of equilibrium that other people may not have yet. I am so very secure in my own cultural identity that I don't mind the pushback and can handle that sort of deference, if you will, to that concept. So it's not everyone is there yet. Hopefully most people, if you're not there, you're getting there, you're working towards it. But you can't be all things to all people all the time. And that includes your people. Because, skin folk ain't kinfolk, and that's the truth. So,
Yep.
Vanessa, do you want to go next, or
You got it. No, you go ahead. You go right
So let me see if I can. I know that I'm not going to answer this in a short manner, but like I'm going to try. When you start, like I said, I mean, like as someone who has been writing graphic novels, there are moments when I start getting so personal that, like, because again, like it's, yeah, I knew that I was going to fumble through this, but I swear I have a point. None of my books are autobiographical, but they are very personal. And when you start writing personal, the first few steps are always going to seem very individualistic. because, well, you're writing personal, you're writing, very much about yourself. But if you keep digging there, eventually you're going to start finding out what your roots are bringing you to. And before you realize it, you are writing from a cultural standpoint. And I'll give you the perfect example just because we're talking about Suncatcher. And I've said that, I think I've said this in other places. So sorry if you've already heard it, but here we go. The original, when I first started coming up with the idea for Suncatcher, I just wanted an excuse to draw guitars for like 200 pages. I just wanted to draw a comic book about music. I just wanted to draw bands and, doing live performances and stuff. But as I started writing it, like suddenly I started getting more interested in like this idea of like what music means, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, all this to like somewhere in the drafts is how I landed on citing the story in my hometown. I mean, now it's one of the things that I'm the proudest of and that I'm bragging about all the time. It's just like it's a graphic novel in my hometown. Right. It's amazing. But truth be told, that wasn't part of the original idea. The original idea was just an excuse to draw, as many Stratocasters as I could. But the more I kept writing, the more I started discovering that I really wanted to talk about this very special city to me and how insignificant it was during this very specific moment in time. Like when the internet was not, like, it existed, we had emails, but the internet was not what it is now. Like if you had a MySpace, let alone if you put your music on MySpace, you were being fancy. So after writing many, many drafts, eventually I landed on this moment in time in the early 2000s when teenagers were basically responsible for making these live shows for their schoolmates and them organizing them together and making flyers made with pencil on paper and a Xerox and just handing them out outside of different schools just so anywhere between 200 to 300 people would show up and just like, I mean, I don't want to say that they weren't talented, but there was a lot of grit in those times. And anyways, now so as you realize, now I'm talking about a very specific cultural moment. All these kids living in the border that were familiar with American radio, that were familiar with American television, that were familiar with skater punk California culture, but living in Mexico, so therefore having traditional Mexican roots and speaking Spanish. That is a culture in and of itself that before I realized I was writing about that, even though, again, it started with just, well, I'm just going to write why I like Appetite for Destruction so much, because that album is still a banger. But I also want to talk about Café Tacuba and some of these other rock bands that were very prominent in the 80s. Anyways, my long way of answering for that of like, when you start writing, not necessarily autobiographical, but personal, if you keep digging, eventually you will also discover like where your roots are coming from. And that is also like something that you're going to start finding other things in common, that you are talking about something that is more culturally broad. And then it starts having a resonance, right? So it's a very long-winded answer, but
I love it because you don't get there by thinking about it. You get there by writing.
Right.
You discover as you write. Again, we've overcognized ourselves. There's a lot of work that we have to do. So look, I'm going to ask this last question. It's long. I think it's a great question, and it'll be our last question for now. And then we'll go from there. So as I said, it's a long question. It was said before that it is easier to just live through life than it is to think cognitively through it. Now, I want to bring up the topic of identity and the feeling of belonging with that. There are some people in this world that have issues with other identities that are foreign to them, and this creates a disturbance in people's selves, right? So, I guess my question is, how would any of you say for individuals to live through their life when they may not be accepted even in their own communities? For example, I am white and Hispanic, and these identities have clashed with their respective groups on the occasion. I grew up with Mexican culture and white skin, but am not seen as Mexican enough by some since I'm white, and even vice versa. How are people supposed to feel comfortable as themselves, but also be accepted as part of a group? specifically looking at those who identify in their community but are not regarded as gay enough, Black enough, old enough, or any kind of enough.
If I may.
Please.
Thank you for sharing that.
And that was Renee Plunk, by the way. That was the person who had their hand raised. So
thank you, Renee. I appreciate you. And I see you as a biracial Black woman. My mom is white and my dad is Black, and I, throughout my life, have felt like I was straddling these two worlds, never fitting neatly into any space. And so, a short answer to that I would say, what worked, what I'm going to say is something that worked for me, and I know that it may not necessarily work for all people. I think what you do to sort of move through the world in your authentic way is absolutely unique to you. I think what helped me was getting to a place where I learned to accept that I decide my worth and my value. I think I always say my self-worth is not dictated by external expectations. So if someone thinks I'm not Black enough, all right. You know what I'm saying? And again, that took me years, like until like 5 years ago. Like that didn't happen overnight, and it's still a work in progress. And I think that part of what also helped me was really doing my own sort of, when I was in grad school, we did a lot of work around racial identity and just learning that sort of for psychology school. And it was so deeply personal to me. And I think as I continue to do things like ReggieCon and go out and build my own brand, there are other stories that I find that are deeply personal to me that help me to not necessarily see myself, but see my experiences. And I think that getting to a place where I understand, and this is, forgive this sort of pejorative language, but I'm not crazy because I feel the way that I feel. This is a thing that a lot of people feel, right? This sort of not knowing where you fit in is something that is, again, not that you need that validation, but it absolutely is something that a lot of people experience. So I would say, in addition to just doing your sort of own work about how you identify as a human being, but getting to the place I feel like where you understand that no matter where you are, you have the same worth and you are a beautiful, powerful human being.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yes, of course.
Dear Renee, it feels like you've been reading my diary. No, and I say that both with humor, but also with sincerity. And I know exactly what you're talking about. Very familiar. I'm very familiar with this dichotomy, with this tension. It's very understandable. If I'm reading this correctly, and I hope I am, I know exactly what you mean. And it's gonna seem a little corny for me to say this, but I do stand by it, is that two things. One, you are enough. And two, you don't owe anybody anything about your heritage. I stand by that. If your question is for, it's like, how do you deal with that? I do want to go back a little bit to what I was saying earlier of, it's important to have the space for exploration, and it's important to have, it's important to find spaces, and it's important to find like methods on how you can explore that about you, that which is bringing you so much conflict. And again, that conflict is very real. It's very much a thing that happens in Mexican communities, Mexican American communities, and especially if you're living in America, it's a very real thing. So if you're wondering how to navigate that, I would recommend is that you try to find places to explore that about yourself. Try to explore those things. And yes, unfortunately, you will be encountering a lot of people that will tell you that no matter what you do, they will continue kicking, they will continue moving the goalposts. Like no matter what, those are not good people to have in your life. Those are people that you don't need validation from. But by that same token, there are people that are going through me amongst them, by the way, there are people that are going through the exact same thing that you are, that you can express these things, that you can talk about these things, that you do have permissibility to explore of like, well, I know what I look like, but I know how I feel. And I can't bring this up to some people who don't see me the way that I feel. And there are people that are like, yeah, but it's good to have a space like that. I hope this doesn't come across as if I'm like trying to like put a plug in, but like I remember that one of the things that really helped me a lot was listening to an NPR show called Code Switch, where they talk very much constantly about these things. And that has given me like a lot of tools to explore these things. And again, going back to like just like if I may talk from an individual perspective, for the longest time, like I also didn't feel Mexican enough because I listened to mostly British bands. But then given the opportunity to explore that, then I end up discovering like who do I don't like. I know what part of me is like. I know the parts of myself now. I wish I wish I would have felt like this younger, like when I was younger. But that's neither here nor there. So if you are in that situation, I understand that. And yes, do as much as you can or as much as you're willing to permit yourself to explore that about yourself. But I'm giving you the conclusion right now. You don't need anyone's validation and you are enough.
There you go.
I love that.
And the thing is, it's work.
Right.
Oh, it's work. I'm sorry, man, but that's one thing I love about the conversation and I love about the graphic novel. We actually see Beatrice work. We see the frustration of working. And again, you can't think yourself out of it. You can take moments to think and reorganize where you're going, but you've got to do the work. So find people that provide respite during the work. And the work will get you to the moments Victor pointed out in that frame. And it will take work.
And
Renee,
can I jump in on that last little thing for Renee? Both Jose and Vanessa gave you very empowering words to self-identify your value. I want to give you something to undervalue the terms that are used against you like that. Those are colonizer terms, and they hold no power, right? They are simply meant to try to divide you from your community. And you don't have to let them do that, right? Like you can tell them, express to that person how colonized they are with that mentality, that they aren't representing the culture well by trying to divide you away from it. That is not the culture. That is anti the culture, and therefore should not be utilized, not against you or by them. So give them that food for thought as a nice little dessert, by the way.
Victor laying down a bit of a kung fu lesson with a mic drop there.
What a jiu-jitsu move right there.
There you go. I always told my kids to love everybody at different distances. The kung fu, keep them out of your life. Okay, so then on end, guys, we really got to unfortunately close this fantastic conversation. Victor and Vanessa, thanks so much for being here and being a part of tonight's conversation.
Absolutely. My pleasure to be back. This is one of the highlights of my month every year that we've been doing this. I've loved it. And the exploration, the conversation, the innovations that we're having. That's it. I love it.
I second that. Thank you all so much. This was absolutely
That's fantastic. And Edcel, it was so good to see you again and to celebrate Latinx Heritage Month once again with you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to all the panelists. Like I had a blast. I hope I didn't ramble too much. If there's a round 2, please let me know.
Fantastic.
So thank you so much. Also, like just really quick, who drew that Suncatcher of Beatrice playing the guitar?
That was Sean Thornton. Yeah, if you go to the ReggieCon site, you'll see that he does the flyer for every month, to the point where we're going to start selling a fundraising book collection of his prints, because they're just amazing.
Sign me
Absolutely amazing. Well, thank you very much. Edcel, thank you for being here as well. It's good to see you again.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all for the space. This was incredible, and I really love the conversations. I'll be thinking about this for the rest of the night. So
No, there you go.
Thank you for everything that you brought up, and yeah, to all of you. Yeah, I don't know if it's do we just leave? Do we close?
No, I got a couple more things I got to say here real
Okay.
quick. I just wanted to thank all of you for being here and letting you say something in return. So we'll see you next month at our next ReggieCon when we discuss this amazing graphic novel adaptation
Oh,
of the classic The Great Gatsby.
solid.
So this is The Great Gatsby retold in a contemporary LGBTQ plus framework.
Love it.
I will trigger warn for the audience. There are moments of adult sexuality
Okay.
graphically depicted in this graphic novel that I don't feel like I should have to mention, yet at the same time, trigger warnings are such that please know this is adult content. And we will be joined on Thursday, October 26th at 7 p.m. by the author, Jeremy Holt, and the illustrator, Felipe Cunha. So we're looking forward to that. Please go to Dark Loops Productions. Maybe by Sunday, I will have this recording posted there. And this is why ReggieCon gets to keep living on, because, you know, we've got over 2,000 views of our videos, which may not sound like much in YouTube space, but the fact is they're there forever. I use them in my classes. They're fantastic. Thanks to everyone in the audience for attending. And thanks to everyone, once again, behind the scenes for making us look like we know what we're doing. So there we go. Until next time, thank you and have a good evening.
You as well. Thank you.